Hello and welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I am delighted to be here with my good friend Lilly Minkove, who was on episode 2 or 3 or 4 of this show 9 years ago. 9 years ago, Lilly was one of the very first episodes that we did. And Lilly, it is wonderful to welcome you back.
Thank you, Will. It's great to be back. And I am so impressed with how this podcast has grown over the past few years and how Umbrex has evolved. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, I don't know if it's better, but it is 620 something episodes more experienced or something. So we've been around. So tell us a little bit about your background, and then let's get to kind of your current endeavor with HeraSphere. HeraSphere. Yeah, so just give us a quick sketch, and then let's talk about HeraSphere.
Sure. So my background is really the last 25 years I spent as a brand and strategy consultant in around retail, beauty, and wellness. We met at McKinsey way back in the day. After business school, I went to McKinsey to learn more about consumer products. I really was interested in kind of people and consumer insights and why people did what they did, and specifically in the luxury sector. So after McKinsey, I joined Tapestry, working on the Coach brand, and then went to Louis Vuitton, really kind of really enmeshing myself in the luxury world to help these brands understand why consumers make decisions and how to grow. And for the past 14 years, I left the corporate world and have been running ArtLogica Group, which is a boutique consulting practice, really using customer insights to help brands develop their growth strategies.
Yeah. And at one of our early events for Umbrex, I vividly recall we did this 3-day offsite event for Umbrex members back in 2015, where 11 years ago, where you led a really great section on how to do a consumer survey. Was something I still turn to, that session that you led. So let's talk about one area that your practice is evolving into in terms of women's health and HeraSphere, and you have some content around that. So tell us a little bit about your current focus.
Sure. So I was in the retail and luxury world for a really long time, and I still do a lot of work in that sector. But my interest in health and wellness has really kind of eclipsed that in many ways on a personal level. And it all started kind of as a passion project. So in 2023, I went to a longevity talk
Hmm.
um, by Dr. Darshan Shah, who started Next Health, which is a chain of longevity clinics in LA. And he came to talk to a bunch of us, and we drew blood work. We got like 200 biomarkers, and then he talked to us about here's how you should be looking at all this data. And I was just totally shocked that as a relatively educated person who considered myself pretty healthy, I did not really know any of what he was talking about.
Hmm.
And I started just telling my friends to be like, my college girlfriend text chat, be, hey guys, like, have you measured your little LP little a? Do you know what your APOB score is? Like, these are all things we should be tracking. And at the same time, so this is my consumer insights brain working, my entire network is going through perimenopause or menopause. Like every conversation goes to all the symptoms that people know or don't know. So I kind of connected the dots of, my whole life translating customer insights into growth strategy for clients. I thought, I could do the same for women's health, except now my client is the individual. How do I take all this kind of information that is readily available, but just to a few people, to women everywhere? So I basically started HeraSphere as a women's health newsletter, translating kind of the latest innovations in healthcare, peer-reviewed research, kind of what longevity doctors are doing in a lot of the like kind of tech bro world, but making that into plain English and then distilling it into really easy actions that anyone could take.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
the
all right.
audience is primarily women who are 40 plus, but I would say a lot of these principles and science obviously applies to everyone because a lot of things are common in the human body. And in for this consulting audience that is listening to this, I think we think about our businesses in much more rigorous ways than we actually think about our bodies. So I kind of am drawing that analogy into what this means, what are the KPIs we should be thinking about for ourselves, and how to really kind of think about it like a business.
Okay, what are some of the KPIs for
Um,
ourselves?
so I want to start prefacing really thinking about like kind of our healthcare system as a disease management system. So just to take the analogy a little further, most of us, this is what I used to do. You get 15 minutes with an annual checkup with a doctor once a year, and they're kind of, looking at some basic blood work and say, okay, you're fine, you're not fine. Here's some really basic information. So your doctor is essentially a parachute consultant. They drop in, they take a slice of data, they give you a few recommendations, and they leave. But I think the challenge is, they don't know your history, they don't know how your lifestyle is evolving, they don't see the system. So if you have an ill-informed consultant, the worst case scenario is that they give you some wrong advice and you probably just don't work with them again. But if the doctor gives you the wrong advice or misses something systemic, you're the person who's living with the consequences. So it's really about thinking about, if your body is a system, how do you live by the numbers, and what is the operating system that you're working under? So I would say, like, before I jump into the KPIs, I really want to think about the framework. So based on all the research that I've done, obviously I'm not a physician or even a medical professional, but I thought a lot about this. And what I've learned from all the podcasts and doctors I've spoken to is that you actually don't learn a lot about like nutrition and lifestyle and a lot of these kind of basic things in medical school. It's a lot about the disease management of, here are the symptoms, here's how you diagnose it. And so a lot of the doctors that I know kind of have done their own research to work to understand what are some of the latest developments and how you really think about health as a system. So the 5 pillars that I've seen and kind of across the different ones are really exercise and muscle and sleep. The third is thinking about nutrition. The fourth is brain health. And then I think the 5 is actually connection. So I'll give you a high level on each of those, and then we can kind of talk about the KPIs that really tie together all of the systems.
Great.
And feel free to jump in. I know, like, I could talk about these things all day long. So if there's specific questions that you have, or I guess one question for you, like, what do you do for exercise? Like, what is your regimen?
Yeah, so I have been for about 30 years, I was mainly doing just running 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, 3 or 4 miles. And then probably like a lot of people my age cohort, you hear all this stuff about strength. So I've started doing more strength training, and I've been doing the 5 by 5 strong kind of strength training. So I've been going to the gym and doing some basic strength training and adding that in. So and then I'll go on these long walks. So I walked across England last year, 100 miles, and then I'm doing another 100-mile walk in May. And to kind of prep for those, I'll do 10 or 12-mile walks, nothing super crazy, kind of around the city or whatever, a little swimming. So that's kind of my routine.
That's pretty awesome. I would say that, most people are probably like you a few years ago, where they
Yeah.
think of cardio, it's about losing weight, maintaining kind of looking good and being in shape, which there's nothing wrong with that. Cardio is really important, but I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of muscle is so important. So I think what a lot of people don't know is that muscle is actually an anti-aging metabolic organ. The tissue, every time you exercise, your muscles actually produce what are called mitokines. So they're anti-inflammatory proteins that slow insulin resistance. They fight visceral fat, which is a fat within your organs that is really drives up your risk of cardiovascular disease. And they actually protect bone density also. So muscle is your body's largest endocrine organ. It actually communicates with your brain and helps you defend against Alzheimer's. So I think especially for women and a lot of men, they focus so much on the cardio, but it's actually really the strength training is so important of building both structural integrity in your bones and muscle, but also building up the muscle to kind of really combat frailty in your older age.
Mm.
because it really strengthens bone density. And it's not only about being strong, but it's also helps your neuroplasticity, which is helping the muscles actually directly communicate with your brain. So every time you are building muscle, your brain actually is also rewiring its ability to change and adapt. And there's a lot of cognitive benefits with strength training as well.
Yeah, on the strength training, I guess I started getting into it around 3 or 4 years ago and got more serious about it last year. I'd say it's easy to be intimidated by it, and it's okay to start gentle on yourself. And at least my experience was earlier, I was a little bit haphazard and just going in and, oh, I'll just sort of just sit down today at this machine or whatever. And I'd say for me, it's been better doing this program. It's like 5 by 5, this program that is called, I use this thing called Strong Lifts, where instead of trying to spend hours in the gym, you can kind of do it in a limited amount of time. And the
Mhm.
Strong Lifts program there's just 5 exercises that you do, and each one you do alternating days. Like you only have to do 3 days a week, and when you go, you do just 5 or 3 different exercises, and it alternates. And each exercise you do only 5 reps, or 5 sets of 5 reps. So you're doing 5 sets of 5 reps of 3 exercises. There's 75 reps total in the gym. It takes like 40 minutes. And you finish it just feeling not the most fun doing it, but you finish it feeling like just so much more energy. For people that say, "Oh, I don't have time to go to the gym," you actually are so much more productive afterwards that it kind of your increased efficiency makes up for the cost time of it. And you can start gentle and just, if you have a kind of a set program in mind, at least my experience, where it's defined, where you can kind of measure your progress, it's much more satisfying. And it's better to do fewer exercises than more. Um, so that you can actually see your progress over time. That's my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ideal is 3 times a week. Obviously, you kind of have to work your way up to it. Even if you're just starting out, I think even, body weight squats and really working your legs and glutes, those are the
Yeah.
largest muscles in your body, and they actually give you much more bang for your buck in terms of kind of all the benefits of building muscle. So I would say the lifting heavy is a key difference. Like, I used to go to the gym and lift like 3 pound weights. So there are a lot of those Jane Fonda videos, which I
Yeah.
love Jane Fonda, and she's actually now such a proponent of women's health as well. And she's kind of saying, that was just back when they were selling us a lot of baloney in terms of what is actually worthwhile. But I think the lifting heavy and really trying to figure out what works for you is the best. The second pillar I would say that is so important is really sleep.
Yeah.
And I think this is the one I'd push hardest on with a business audience of
All right.
management consultants. I think these are the high performers that I used to do this all the time, of like, sleep was the thing I would sacrifice to get whatever done, whether it's something for my family or something work related. And, this is probably has the most serious consequences that I did not understand initially. So just thinking about the mechanism of sleep. Sleep is effectively when your brain kind of cleans itself out and takes out the trash. And
Yeah.
that's when your immune system is actually hunting for cancer. So there are two things that happen in your sleep, especially during stages of deep sleep. So your brain activates the glymphatic system, which is kind of a waste clearance system that flushes out all the waste throughout the day. And it's a lot of these things that are related to Alzheimer's disease, called tau protein and amyloid beta. So it's done exclusively during deep sleep. So if you don't get the quality sleep, your brain is not clearing these things out. It has a lot of long-term effects. Secondly, your immune system is developing natural killer cells while you're sleeping. So they are basically these cells that go in and identify abnormal cells that could be like precancer, and they kill these off. So if you think about the whole idea of like, your body is replicating cells the trillions of cells at any one point in time, and there are going to
Yeah.
be mistakes. And so these natural killer cells find those mistakes and they eradicate them before they become something more dangerous. And there's research that shows, even one night of like less than 4 hours of sleep can kill 70% of your natural killer cell activity in your brain or in your system. So that's just one night of sleep deprivation. So all of this to say is that sleep is such a core part of how your body rejuvenates and restores itself. And this is one of the key levers that I really was not aware of before really researching all of this. So it was all like, I can function, I can have some caffeine, I have a lot of energy, it doesn't really matter. But obviously it's all the things that show up over time.
Now, maybe we're going to get to the actual KPIs later, but I'm curious, what are some of the recommendations, the science-based recommendations that you've come up with on sleep? Like, you hear sort of 8 hours, but I understand that the science around that specific number is a bit contested. So, like, what are some of your recommendations about sleep?
I've done a lot of sleep research and have talked to and listened to a lot of sleep doctors. So I think the couple of things is actually one of the key metrics for sleep is actually more regularity, like going to bed at the same time every day actually is a much more important metric than potentially even length of sleep. So just that consistency of letting your circadian rhythm run itself. So I think the optimal is 7 to 8 hours of sleep, but the quality also matters. So one interesting fact is I started wearing just a very basic tracker called Amazfit on my wrist, and it tracks sleep for better or for worse, how accurate it is, but it's at least internally consistent.
Yeah.
And there are nights if I have a glass of wine and I go to sleep at the same time, I wake up at the same time, and I can see on my tracker that my quality of sleep is worse.
Oh, yeah.
So there's obviously the consistency of sleep, and then the quality of sleep is really important. So actually knowing how much deep sleep you're getting is really critical. And I think there's a lot of things around sleep hygiene that the doctors talk about in terms of like putting your phone in a different room, having the temperature be 65 or below to really kind of effectively your body temperature has to drop in order for you to go to sleep, and your heart rate needs to drop below a certain rate in order to go to sleep. So all of these factors will help with the quality of sleep as well as consistency. It's obviously difficult because we live our lives and there are lots of things disrupting it, but trying to optimize that. This has become one of the key areas. Dr. Wendy Troxel is a sleep doctor that I've actually met, and I love her line of saying, treat sleep like a dear friend. Like, take care of it, make sure that you're monitoring it and making sure that you're really kind of thinking about it proactively rather than just kind of being like it'll be what it'll be.
Yeah. I read one piece that was a bit of a critique of some of the sleep research. Like you read, okay, 8 hours is then I saw one thing like really diving into, okay, what's the research behind that? And it was a little bit thin. I guess in my own experience, just like experimenting on myself, I found, yes, to your point, you bring up alcohol. I was finding that alcohol would like, having a glass of wine or something in the evening would result in like worse sleep. So that was one of the reasons I cut out alcohol 6 years ago. Just completely 100%. Like a lot of people, I guess like more and more people are doing that. But I cut out alcohol. And I've also found, at least for me, that the timing of sleep matters a lot. Like for me, I found that 6 hours feels about right to me for most nights. Sometimes you need like a long one, but I find that I find function very well on about 6 hours. But the timing of it matters a lot. Like if I go to bed at 10 p.m. and wake up at 4 a.m., usually that's perfect, right? I feel
Mm.
great. Get up at 4 a.m., feels great. Whereas if I go to bed at 12 and get up at 6 in the morning, I feel like junk. So it's like a little bit about the timing of it. You're pointing consistency, and it's also just maybe your own rhythm as opposed, against the clock. Some people are larks, some people are night owls.
Yes, for sure.
Um,
There are definitely different sleep archetypes. And to your point about sleeping earlier, I think it definitely varies by individual, but research shows that a lot of the deep sleep happens earlier in the evening for whatever reason. So that really, I mean, supports your experience. The earlier,
Yeah.
the 10 p.m. gets you probably higher quality deep sleep than the 12 p.m., even though the hours are the same.
Yeah. And it also feels a little bit like sort of how anxious and stressed out you are. If you don't have a ton of things kind of stressing you out that much and you just have this nice, calm, interrupted baby sleep, it
Mhm.
does seem more restorative than if you have like some deliverable to do the next day at 8 a.m. and you're stressing about it all night long and kind of waking up and thinking about like, oh my God, I gotta get up at 6 a.m. and finish this like email or something. If
Yep.
you,
So there are actually two things related to that. One is there's actually a lot of research that if you kind of write down the things that you're thinking about and put like physically write them down,
yeah,
your
yeah,
brain kind of is able to let them go and
huh,
kind of say it's parked somewhere. I don't have to carry it in kind of my
yeah.
working memory anymore.
I like that tip.
So
Yeah.
that actually helps a lot. And then the other thing I would say related to that is I actually lost my train of thought. I think in terms of the sleep that is um, kind of interrupted often happens more often than we like in, as we get older, you're getting up to go to the bathroom. And one of the tricks that Dr. Troxel shared is to not look at the clock, because there is something about looking at the clock and doing the calculation of, oh my God, I have this many hours left. So ideally, she said, don't go to the bathroom if you can, but if you do wake up, don't look at the clock and just kind of try to get back without, and that's something that I've tried to do. And I would say the last thing is I actually now set like a sleep alarm, not to go to sleep, but like an hour before I go to sleep to kind of try to calm down,
Yeah.
and kind of let go, like you let your brain kind of
Yeah.
decompress out of all the things that happened in the day. And I also now take magnesium at night because a lot of
Really?
people are magnesium deficient. And I
Yeah.
found that when I do the magnesium, I get a better quality sleep.
Hmm.
And because magnesium does calm the brain, it helps stimulate kind of calming hormones in your brain. And
Really?
so if you take it about an hour or 30 minutes before bed, that does help with the quality of sleep.
All right. So
Uh,
we did exercise and sleep. Okay.
Okay.
Nutrition.
So the next is nutrition. And I think, we've all seen so many things about ultra processed food and all the things that our culture is on. So I think one thing that I learned that was really like kind of jarring to me was the fact that, sugar is so terrible for your body. It's not
Hmm.
just about the weight gain. It
Yeah.
actually ages your cells and it feeds the metabolic environment for disease. So sugar, when it goes into your system, converts into glucose, and glucose attaches to all your proteins in your blood vessels. It's kind of like a sticky coating all over your
Hmm.
blood. So that also creates compounds that trigger inflammation in your body, and that is actually the mechanism behind cardiovascular disease and heart disease. It also potentially could trigger diabetes and cellular aging, and increasingly they kind of talk about Alzheimer's and dementia as type 3 diabetes, triggered really by too much sugar and glucose, and the management system
Hmm.
behind it. So there's a doctor called Dr. William Lee who is a Harvard trained physician who does a lot of cancer work. And
Hmm.
what he has shown is that cancer cells preferentially run on glucose. So if you have a lot of sugar in your diet, it doesn't cause cancer per se, but it
Hmm.
keeps that door open. There's a lot of glucose in your system. There's a lot of fuel for whatever cancer cells might be there. So it is a similar, and it's obviously a similar lifestyle that protects your heart and your brain, because nutrition is really the key lever to help your metabolism. There's, I think, I'm not sure the exact statistic, but some crazy amount of Americans are actually metabolically unhealthy, whether they're
Yeah.
overweight or not. It's more about their metabolic health is out of control. And it is a lot due to the ultra processed foods and high sugar diets that a lot of us consume.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense to me. I cut out sugar like 6 years ago as well, and it's actually harder than cutting out alcohol. But
Well,
um,
it's amazing what's hidden in sugar. What hidden
yeah,
sugar is hidden in, I should say. There's so many
yeah,
foods that you're like, oh, wow, this is actually high in sugar.
Yeah. Beyond eliminating sugar, what are some of the other nutrition tips?
So there is actually, I would say there are two things. One is that it's not all about eliminating sugar per se. It's also about the sequence in which you eat your food. That
Okay.
actually helps control the glucose in your system. So the principle, there's a doctor called Jessie Inchauspé who is called the Glucose Goddess, and she has a book called The Glucose Revolution. And this is what I learned from hers. You eat fiber first, you eat the vegetables, and that actually kind of forms like a protective coating in your gut that kind of protects against the absorption of some of this sugar. And then you eat the protein and then the fat, and then the carbohydrates and sugar last. So that same meal, just in different sequence, could have a 75% lower glucose spike in your blood sugar. And so because the fiber is like kind of coating your intestines in this gel type solution that then that slows and decreases the glucose absorption.
Hmm.
So, we're gonna eat sugar lots of times. There's kind of in our lives as celebrations. And so I think there's a way of kind of tempering the impact, even if you have those enjoyable meals. The second thing I will say is it's really about eating the diversity of plants and plant-based vegetables. The standard is actually eating 30 different types of plants and vegetables in a week.
Oh,
And
wow. 30. That's pretty high number.
it is a very high number. So the idea is that the different foods feed your gut microbiome in different ways. So but your gut contains all this bacteria, and that is actually kind of what keeps your system running. So all the different foods and the diversity of foods actually feed your gut in a very different way and help build the good bacteria that keep you healthy. So I was actually at a talk last night with Dr. Mary Claire Haver, who is a pretty renowned menopause doctor at her book talk in DC. And she talked about like almost like gamifying it. So having a list with 30 spots. And so throughout the week, filling in like how many of the 30 different vegetables and fruits have I eaten this week? And it's actually been a fun thing I've done with my kids. There was a period where they're like, okay, mom, here's how many I ate at school today for lunch. And really kind of getting them into the conversation earlier, because there's some kids who are, and I have one who just hate vegetables, and kind of that makes it a little bit more interactive. But the diversity really does matter. So I actually also do a lot of shopping, like Asian grocery stores, which have so many more vegetables than kind of your typical like American Giant or Safeway type of grocery store, and just trying to sample different ones and creating that diversity.
Yeah. All the Asian greens you can get at the Asian grocers, or if you go to like the farmers market in Union Square of New York
Mm-hmm.
City, there's all these more vegetables off the beaten path a little bit. Okay, so we talked about exercise, sleep, and nutrition. What was next?
So the next is brain health. And I think this was a big aha for me. And like the brain is probably the most important organ in your body in terms of your health. And I think it's I think a 3 or 4 pound organ, but it takes about 20% of your daily caloric intake to run your brain. And so thinking about fueling our brain and keeping our brains healthy is so important. And I think it's also about, the way you're wiring your brain to create new habits and create new pathways. So just as a very basic example, I'm actually doing a cardio dance performance with some friends.
Oh, nice.
And this is a totally new muscle for me, because I like to, it's a fun way, it started out as a fun way to exercise, but we have like 7 songs and they're all choreographed with different steps. And so I was like, for the life of me, I could not remember how the sequencing and what to do when. And the teacher was like, just go home and do it 100 times, like each step, like, just do it. And then once you hear the music, your muscle memory will just kick in. And it actually is, it's not happened, or not totally there yet, but it's happening. And I kind
All
of
right.
feel like it's my brain actually just like taking over. So think about all the good habits and all the good things you want to be doing, there's a way to actually train our brain into thinking more positively and more kind of constructive ways. But I think that the really big thing I came away with is I went to a recent talk where I discovered that actually only 3 to 4% of Alzheimer's cases are genetic, and the majority of cases can be prevented. And it's actually, I mean, this was the fact that the decisions you make in your 40s and 50s are the most powerful predictors of cognitive outcomes in later years, because it is actually Alzheimer's is a disease of midlife decisions. It's really about how do you protect your brain with exercise, nutrition, and not waiting to kind of see what the outcome is, because it's primarily within our control with a lot of the lifestyle measures that we can take.
Okay, so I'm not super sure I understand about the brain health. Are we talking about like keeping your brain active and continuing to like learn new things, or is it more something about like mindfulness or is it continuing like to challenge yourself with new skills, or what is brain health?
So I think that there are probably the three key areas. One is keeping your brain active through exercise. So what we talked about in terms of the mitokines before that are helping form new pathways in your brain when you exercise. So strength training is a critical way to keep your brain healthy.
Okay.
And I think that is not necessarily intuitive for a lot of us. I think two is continue to keep your brain active and doing things that are kind of learning new things, and continue to keep it, like learning new languages is one of the best things you can do for your brain to activate new pathways. Playing mahjong actually is something I've been doing. It's been really heating up in my social circles, and the fun part is that you're looking at this group of tiles and you're trying to form, there's, you know, the American style of mahjong, there's something like 50 different hands you could make. And so you get these cards or tiles and you're trying to figure out, okay, which one of these 50 am I most likely to be able to make? And it's a little bit of, you know, and I sometimes like, I wish I had an AI to help me figure this out, but that's the workout for my brain of figuring it out on my own, and then kind of making trade-offs of saying, well, I could go this way or I could go that way. And so that is a key thing. And then actually another key thing to keep your brain healthy, especially for women, is actually ensuring that you have enough estrogen in your system. So brain loss is actually the brain loses access to a primary fuel source of glucose when estrogen drops in your system during menopause. So a lot of people actually have the brain fog, the memory lapses. It's because your blood isn't getting enough, your brain is not getting enough energy to function. So this is a lot of women happening at the peak of their careers, and you know, for the leaders and business leaders out there, as well as for the people who have partners who, or mothers or relatives and loved ones who may be experiencing this. Estrogen is so important for your brain, which is why it's really important for women to think about ways to explore supplementation of estrogen during menopause.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's something kind of counterintuitive to what you're thinking about in terms of like, what does menopause have to do with brain health? It's actually really very much linked to it. And it is one of the reasons why some of these brain fog, a lot of women develop like ADHD type of symptoms. And it's because the estrogen is actually impacting how their brain can use energy sources of glucose.
Okay.
I think brain health field, it is also downstream of a lot of different metrics. So one of the things that is not apparent is in terms of like blood pressure and blood vessels and inflammation, all of those things actually also trigger inflammation in your brain. So all of the other things we talked about also tie together in the system.
Okay. And what's the last area?
The last one is actually connection.
Oh,
And that's one of the things that I love about the Umbrex gatherings that you've been making, because as an independent consultant, I spend a lot of time virtually on Zoom calls and working remotely for clients. So there was actually a Harvard study that found social isolation carries a greater mortality risk for women than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And so it is, back in the caveman days, we lived together in groups of, 100 to 300 individuals, and we helped each other. And so loneliness actually drives cortisol, which is a hormone in your system. It suppresses immune function. It accelerates a lot of inflammation pathways that we're trying to manage. So, for women and for men, I think the infrastructure of connection is actually kind of collapsing for lots of us. Like when you're in school, you have this system. Once you leave
sure.
the system and you go into a workplace, you have some, kind of workplace connections. But I think as a lot of us have developed families, the nuclear family is much stronger now than the extended multi-generational households we used to have. So on the surface, and systemically, we just don't have the same type of connection. So we see that, obviously you have your partner and friends, but sometimes making that meaningful time to stay connected with people around you, and even small connections with like the cashier at the coffee shop and people that you see on the street, like those all kind of feed and help our health, because that helps us feel our bodies feel less lonely. And then there's also the benefits of having that support system in place so that you don't feel like you're alone.
So you've talked to us about these areas and you are writing about them with your blog, and we'll include that newsletter blog link in the show notes. Tell us a bit about your sort of services that you're offering that sort of tie to all of this. Are
Sure.
you more as like a one-on-one coaching, or you're aiming to work with kind of companies to put wellness programs in place, or what? Tell us a little bit about your kind of service offering.
Sure. So my objectives are actually twofold. One, on the consumer side, it really is kind of a passion driven, like I want to share all this great knowledge with the women out there. I also see it as like an amazing consumer insights tool to help me understand what kind of women in my target audience are feeling, and what kind of really to kind of help identify, what are some potential white space options. So I'm kind of using it as almost like as a benefit to them, but also as a kind of continual consumer insight research project. And so for my clients, what I'm offering is, I've been in retail, luxury, kind of consumer facing brands for 25 years. I know kind of this female consumer in many different aspects. And so this is adding wellness to that. The wellness industry is kind of the Wild West. There's anything from supplements to boutique fitness to all sorts of trackers, and it's really overwhelming from a consumer perspective. So for brands and companies, what I'm offering is, look, I can help you distill what do your customers actually want, and how can you best convey, share, offer value to them, and also obviously grow your business or service at the same time.
Okay, fantastic. So why don't you just mention the links? Where can people who want to learn more about what you're writing about, where can they find you online?
Sure. So my website is on the Beehive platform. So it's HeraSphere, HeraSphere .beehive, BEHIIV.com. And I also publish on LinkedIn, because I really feel like it's this professional audience that is often neglecting their health and focusing on their businesses. But really the two need to go hand in hand and for the long term. So maybe at the end, we could talk about the KPIs.
Oh yeah, let's go through them.
Kind of started with the KPIs, and I feel like we kind of needed to understand the whole system. And then, so, think about the KPIs. I'll do it in kind of easy to more challenging. So the first free, easy, immediate is blood pressure. That's basically kind of your circulatory load. How hard is your heart working? So normal is 18/20. If it's over 130, you need to start having a conversation. A lot of physicians will start recommending medication at 140. There are lots of different ways to lower your blood pressure through lifestyle and exercise as well. But that's one of the easiest ones because you can do this for free at like most pharmacies or buy a cuff on Amazon for $30. The second one I would say is hemoglobin A1C. And what that measures is your 3-month average blood sugar. So that measure is a signal of your metabolic efficiency. So how well is your body converting fuel into energy without wasting? And that normal is below 5.7. I have to admit, so pre-diabetes is 5.7 to 6.4. So when I first got tested with that test with Next Health in 2023, I realized I was pre-diabetic and I was shocked. I was like, I feel like I'm really healthy. I'm not overweight, but somehow so that was one of the shockers that was like, how did this happen? So this is not necessarily, it's included in a lot of blood work panels, but not always by all doctors. So it's easier to ask your doctor to add that if it's not included. It's also a cardiovascular risk marker and a brain health risk marker. The other one I would say is interesting, especially if there is potential inflammation in your system, is C-reactive protein, CRP. This is another one I learned about in my blood panel. So this basically measures systemic inflammation. So how much inflammation is in your system? Based on how you're exercising and eating, I assume yours would be fairly low, but you're kind of below 1 milligram per liter is low, 1 to 3 is moderate, over 3 is high. And so this is actually relatively easy to also request on a blood work panel, but a lot of people don't know about this. And elevated CRP is associated with cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, metabolic syndrome, a lot of the inflammatory things that are not good for us. The other one is fasting insulin. So that's it's basically requires fasting, and then you do the blood work on a fasted basis. So that measures insulin resistance. A lot of people who are pre-diabetic have insulin resistance. And so it's really how hard is your body working to process the glucose in your system. And this typically is not related, it's not on a regular blood work panel, and does require like asking. And I think that's one of the challenges in our healthcare system, that a lot of doctors don't measure all of these. And sometimes I've asked my regular doctors to add some of this to my blood work, and they're like, I don't think you need it. It's okay. So, that is just something about our system. The other thing I would look at is LDL cholesterol specifically. So the low density cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, which tends to rise, especially for women during menopause. It actually increases during this time because your body is not able to process, your liver isn't able to process it as well during menopause. And it also related to that is APOB, which is a very specific request. APOB is, think of it as almost like a cash flow metric. It gives you a standard of the types of risk factors that you have for heart disease. So a lot of cardiologists require this this panel of LDL specifically and APOB in order to know kind of what your range is. And typically below 90 milligrams per liter is where you want to be. And the last one I would say is a DEXA scan to really understand kind of your bone density and your body composition. A lot of scales now have the body composition, but what they don't have is the bone density. And so it's really to measure, do you have osteopenia or osteoporosis? And, where are you in terms of how strong your bones are? Especially for women, a lot of women lose 15 to 20% of their bone density through the first couple of years of menopause. And so the risk is that your bones are more likely to fracture if you have lowered bone density. So this is actually super easy to get. It's like $99. You do need a prescription, but you need to request it and get this done.
How do they measure your bone density? Is that They just draw blood, or do you get on some kind of scale or
Called a
something?
DEXA scan. And I actually haven't done it yet. I'm scheduled to get one, and I think a lot of like fitness locations will do it, or longevity clinics will do it. I think MRI locations probably offer this as well. So I haven't experienced it myself, but I will let you know once I
All
have.
right.
Again, it's definitely recommended. And then I think the last one a lot of people talk about is VO2 max. And so that's really kind of how hard your body can use oxygen during exercise and your cardiovascular capacity. And it's actually, a lot of people say that's the best measure of longevity. And that is actually kind of hard to measure because you need to like run with a mask on. So it's a
Hmm.
lot of sports medicine clinics or high-end gyms or physicians will do it. But it is supposed to be the strongest predictor of longevity. And so there are a lot of approximations of estimated VO2 max, like on your Apple Watch or Garmin or Whoop, they will estimate what it is, but the real way to do it is actually by going to a clinic or a gym.
All right. Any other KPIs?
I think those are the key ones. There are lots of things to track. I personally do twice a year a function health panel of about 100 biomarkers just
Hmm.
to kind of check on where it is. And that's what I got my parents for the holidays last year to make sure that they're kind of also on the right track.
Huh.
Because I think, to your point, if we think about this like a business, you don't only look at your P&L once a year. It's about how you're actually trending and where are all the places that you could be improving your performance.
Fantastic. Well, Lily, thank you for coming on today and for sharing what you've been learning and great discussion around wellness across the board. Certainly, it's a growing area in terms of business and best wishes on, as you build your wellness focused consulting practice.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. It's been fun talking with you and learning about your own wellness routine.
All right. Thanks.